What I want to do now is go through the actual rubric itself. What you're going to find is that it's fairly easy to synthesize down into a few basic concepts. And you'll look at it the first time and you'll think this is a really big, challenging rubric, and all the exam questions will come from here. So the exam committee will meet around about March and they'll actually look at the rubric and they will come up with your HSC questions. So you need to know that rubric inside out. You can even make a rap about it so you remember it. So let's see if I can now synthesize it for you to make it easier. Because trust me, even though it looks really big and confronting, it's actually really easy, particularly as I talk about how we engage with it. So the very first part of the rubric, and I'm taking a few parts from across the rubric, is process. This is the actual process of discovery itself. In fact, the process of discovery and how a person responds is absolutely significant in terms of what it tells us about them as a human being. So let's look at the rubric. You've got the experience of discovering something for the first time or rediscovering something that has been lost, forgotten, or concealed. So this notion of something new or something that is rediscovered. Interestingly enough, a lot of your texts are about rediscovery. Some catalyst actually triggers that rediscovery of something from the past or about themselves. The second part of the rubric is about they can be sudden and unexpected on one hand, or they can be a process of deliberate and careful planning. So for example, a scientist is looking at splitting the atom. It would have had very deliberate, careful planning, even though sometimes what resulted was unexpected. And it is evoked by curiosity, necessity, or even wonder. As we all know, discoveries can be incredibly confronting and provocative for some people. And of course, they can be fresh and intensely meaningful. So if you look at all the ways in the rubric, we can respond emotionally, we can be creative in our response, intellectual, physical, or spiritual. A young teacher said to me just recently, just remember SPICE. So we go spiritual, physical, intellectual, creative, and emotional. So you put all that together and you ask these questions. What is the discovery? What was the catalyst? Who made the discovery? How and why did it occur? And was the response spiritual, physical, intellectual, creative, and or emotional? So if we were to combine all that, you might have, for example, a character, a persona in a text. Let's just take Prospero from The Tempest. Prospero deliberately planned what he wanted the other people to discover. It's a planned discovery. In the process, he rediscovers who he was, the Renaissance prince. And then he rediscovers at the end the meaning of virtue other than vengeance. And that goes right across all of the texts, whether you're studying a Motorcycle Diaries or The Life of Pi. Have a look at the process itself of discovery. The second one, and I think this is actually quite a significant part of the rubric, even though it's only a really small statement, it's really essential to understand about how we respond. And that is perspectives. Perspectives is the way that we see the world, the way we respond to the world. And more importantly, that's based on our context, which is in the rubric, and it's based on our assumptions in the rubric, but also it's based on our own experiences. So discoveries may be questioned or challenged when viewed from different perspectives, and their worth may be reassessed over time. So in fact, that might be the character or the persona can question or challenge, or other people who see things very differently. So you've got two questions. What were the responses to the discovery? Have the responses to the discovery changed over time? Contextualization is incredibly important now in the rubric, more than it was before in the past for the area of study. So it's about the fact that how we respond and our process is dependent on our context. So of course the obvious question is the significance of this context and our values to how we represent discovery and how we respond to discovery. And then lastly, so if I were to go backwards for a moment, the process, so the actual discovery, the catalyst, what type of discovery it was, how we respond based on our perspectives and contexts, whether it's challenged by others, and now the ramifications, and is there a transformation? So they can lead us to new worlds and values, stimulate new ideas and enable us to speculate about future possibilities. There are 3 dot points in the rubric about this. They can be far-reaching and transformative, and they can offer new understandings and renewed perceptions. of ourselves and others. So what is this telling you? If this is such a significant part you need to look at in terms of poetry or film or non-fiction or novel, what it is about these texts and the human condition in terms of how we respond to discovery and the consequences of those discoveries. And this is also significant for your own creative writing. Have you thought about if there is going to be a ramification, and is there any transformation at all? So 2 key questions. What were the impacts and ramifications of the discovery? And how has the discovery broadened and deepened your understanding of yourself and the world? I'm going to get to that last point again in another aspect of the rubric, but I want you to keep that in mind. I'm going to come back to it. Because as you're responding to the texts, and as you're creating your own texts in creative writing, you need to think about what you have learned. And that's fairly difficult. All English teachers love text, and they usually choose the text they think you'll like and we like. And therefore, we rarely consider whether that text might have had a negative impact on a student. But you need to think now, as I read through Gray's poetry, I look at Che Guevara's journey, is there something in there that I have learnt about myself? And that's going to be challenging for you without it trying to sound trite. And you just say, well, I've discovered, for example, that we should embrace and understand all people and we should be tolerant. You have to be careful it doesn't sound like that. You need to be authentic in your response. So that dot point is personal engagement. And it's now about the ways that composers may invite them to experience discovery through their texts. So you need to think, does the text invite me in? Do I learn about the discovery through the characters or the persona, and why? What is it about the form and the language that made me discover this in the first place? Once you've thought about it, the easiest way to do this, so it sounds authentic, is actually to think of 3 overarching ideas or theses that you have developed after exploring a range of texts and considering your own perceptions in regards to discovery. How do we do this? Ask what you've learned about human experience.